The truth about Tesla.
Yeah, Brian, I'm super excited about today's show. And I think the reason I'm so excited is this one I know is near and dear to your heart, but it's also one that I am super interested in because it has very real and practical implications for me.
So, woke up this morning, and by the way, it's just so, is it the word serendipitous?
Yep,
you know
serendipitous.
How things
Yep.
line up sometimes. Woke up this morning, we knew the show. We talked about this before I went out of town last week.
Yep.
That we were going to do this show, and this morning I got the email from Tesla that, hey, by the way, finish the final step, make your final payment because your Model Y is actually going to be here in the next week to week and a half.
That's
so that's
exciting.
Right. I know I asked months ago, should I keep my Model 3 or should I upgrade to the Model Y? And there's some reasons why I was considering it. I've decided to move forward with the Y, and we're going to be doing content showing you all the financial whys and the reason I felt compelled to go ahead and move that forward.
And Brian, we know when it comes to consumerism, right, and when it comes to a new product hitting market, there are generally a few different stages as whatever the product is the market. You know, there are the innovators, there are the early adopters, there's the early majority, there's the late majority, and there's a laggard. Well, as it relates to Tesla as a product specifically, I'd say that you weren't necessarily an innovator, right? You didn't have it back in 2013, but you're an early adopter, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I have one of the first Model 3s out there.
And so you have kind of like swayed me a little bit in thinking it's one of the coolest cars on the road. We'll talk a little bit about that. So as of officially a few weeks ago, I did put my deposit down for the Cybertruck. So I am like moving in the direction of becoming a Tesla owner. So as a seasoned Tesla owner, I'm curious to know some of your thoughts there. And I'm starting to think, oh, well, if I really love this product, is this something I should think about devoting some of my army of dollar bills to?
Well, I think this is an interesting time because I came back from SEMA. That's where I was last week. I was out in Las Vegas for the big auto industry accessory show that's out there every year in Vegas. It's one of the biggest trade shows they do. And it was outstanding. And I'm out there because one of my buddies he's a former neighbor, and a few of the guys actually with us are in the auto industry, from whether they're restoring cars, repairing cars, or even dealership of cars. One of the larger dealerships, sales guys was there. And everybody who's in traditional auto industry, they have this weird relationship with Tesla because they don't know what to do with it. But here's what I found very interesting. I kind of forgot this. We've got to Las Vegas. It's at the convention center in Las Vegas, and the thing, and I didn't know where the loop was that Tesla, and the Boring Company has built these tunnels all around the Las Vegas Convention Center, and you can take Teslas all around as transportation between west, central, and east. And what I thought was interesting is that a few of these are industry guys in the auto industry. Their favorite part of that first day we were at SEMA was actually riding the Tesla loop because it was kind of space agey in there. So there's something afoot right now, and we wanted to kind of talk about really two questions, but we'll set it up. But the two questions we're going to cover in a minute is, should I buy the product and should I buy the stock? But first, I want to kind of talk about Tesla's been selling a lot of cars.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting seeing how they have hit the market. If you look on the screen now, if you're out in iTunes or iHeartRadio or Stitcher, this shows just quarterly deliveries for Tesla vehicle sales dating all the way back to 2013. And you can see that really in the last, 3 years, 2019, 2020, and then especially here in 2021, quarter deliveries are way up. So it certainly seems that there is a very high demand for this product, and they're starting to be able to deliver on that demand, at least to some extent.
Well, the demand is so high and realize this is a company that has a zero budget for advertising. There's a reason, I think, when you wonder why do Consumer Reports beat them up, why do traditional media beat up Tesla, a lot of it has to do with they're not throwing dollars into traditional advertising, and advertising pays for most of the things that support, if you think about advertising, because auto industry is one of the biggest advertisers, your local media, your local news channel, they derive a lot of their funding directly from that source. So the fact that Tesla doesn't participate in that marketplace, it does put a target on them. But look at this. The demand is so strong. If you wanted a Model X, You have to wait until June of 2022.
And right now, this is the most expensive, right? This is the highest price Tesla model. So, okay, that makes sense, right? The most expensive one, maybe they're not making as many. Okay, out till mid-June. Makes sense.
So Model S, if you wanted a Model S, the sedan, you can see that actually goes out to June as well. If you want the Model Y, which is the smaller SUV, the bigger version of the Model 3 or the SUV variety, it's also June of 2022.
So 3 of the 4 models they have available are pushed out until June. What about the most affordable Model 3?
And then the Model 3, what I currently have, you could, it does have at least a month to a month and a half wait on getting that, but you would have an easier access to the Model 3. But needless to say, lots of demand for Teslas right now.
I think a lot of people probably are in the camp that I am. They have friends who own Teslas. They've driven Teslas. They've ridden in them. And they're starting to think, okay, maybe I should be part of it. If we're out of the early adopter, we're in that early majority phase, perhaps I should jump on this bandwagon. Perhaps I should jump on this train.
Yeah, and that's what. So I want to transition into, should I buy the product?
Sure.
So I just confessed that I was out at SEMA last week. Here's what's interesting. My wife has just had very little interest in driving my car for the last few years, because I think she looked at it as a gizmo, too technology driven, and she just doesn't get caught up in all that.
Not
so
her
she
thing.
just is not. I've tried to get her to get excited about driving it. She just wasn't. Well, she got stuck driving my car all while I was out of town last week because her car was actually in the shop. She
Okay.
had to get some brakes and some other things done. So she was forced to drive my Model 3 all week while I was at this trade show. I came back and she says, I think I want a Tesla.
Oh, she got it.
And I'm
She
telling
got
you,
it.
this is not, because she lives with me, and I think if y'all ask, does my wife watch my content? No, because
Absolutely
she
not.
gets tired of this all the time as it is. So hearing me talk about Tesla is probably kind of annoying to her.
Yep.
But the experience of driving the product completely put her in a different place, and that is kind of the point where. It's interesting that they've sold so many products, and the market seems like they are ready. And you'd mentioned that we're at the point now, Bo, where it seems like we're past the early adopters,
Sure.
and it's become more mainstream. My biggest takeaway on should you consider the product is look, I think it's I enjoy my Tesla. I like the one pedal driving, where you don't have to hit the brakes, the brake pads. Like the issue, like my wife's car, nice car. But the fact that we have to replace the front brake pads at 30,000 mile range because we live in a hilly area of the country just is annoying to me, because I know the Tesla will go 400,000 miles on the same pair of brakes because it uses that regenerative braking where you can go up and down the hills without riding your brakes. So it's the technology, the innovation is just better. So I actually don't mind people, if you're considering buying the product, it is a superior product. I think you'll like it. So I give a strong affirmation to that, as long as you pay respect to the 23/8 philosophy that we always talk about. Is I want to make sure with any vehicle, and by the way, you don't even get to do the 23/8. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to hit the pause button, because I still consider Tesla a premium brand.
Even if it's the Model 3, you still consider it that way.
I still consider, because you're going to end up paying $50,000, $60,000 even on the lower side with a Tesla. So I want you to make that decision. I don't want you financing this thing 6-7 years like they always talk about is available to you. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I want you to have a Tesla paid off within 12 months.
As far as the product is concerned, one thing that I think is so interesting, Brian, as I've kind of watched your journey being a Tesla owner, we recently in the past year had to buy my wife a new automobile, and it was great, and we loved it at first. But then as time went on, we had some issues, and some things weren't perfect, and we kind of had to adjust some things. And the luster and the excitement about the car actually decreased over time. What I think has been so interesting, watching you with your Tesla, is you've actually described it as a car that, because they do all the over-the-air updates, and it's actually a car that gets better over time. Like, you like your car more today than you did when you first bought it. Is that
it
a
has
statement?
a lot more features now than the day I bought it, and that's all because it is kind of revolutionary in the fact that the car does get better over time through the software updates. And here's what I think is interesting. My wife's car was bought 4 months before I bought the Model 3, and it has all the latest and greatest things that Audi offered in technology, yet it has received 0 upgrades. I mean, the matter of fact, it actually went down because they didn't tell me when we bought it that the Google Maps and all the stuff that made it pretty was going to come to me later as an offer for $40 a month if I wanted to keep that prettiness.
Bait and
And I was
switch.
like, whatever. I'll take the 1980s graphics back over giving you guys the $30 to $40
Sure.
a month for your connectivity package. So but Tesla is just it keeps getting better. I mean, when I bought it, the automatic wipers were not as great as they are now. When I bought it, it didn't have automatic high beam where it shuts it down. When you come to oncoming traffic, it didn't. I mean, there's so many different features between the full self-driving, the autopilot keeps getting better. It's truly amazing. The visualizations on the screen have gotten better. It is amazing how over-the-air updates make this machine. It's even gotten faster. Here's the other thing I think is interesting. Elon will send out a tweet saying, "Hey, we're in your upcoming update. We have figured out a way to be more efficient with the engines and the motors on your car. The motors that you're going to see a 10% pickup in your performance and power."
It doesn't happen for
Imagine if
other
you
cars.
drove a sports car and General Motors with their Corvette that you just bought says, "Guess what? We have figured out a way to make this car even better on the way how efficiently it works through the computers and everything else, that we're going to give you an extra 10%. You'd be like, holy cow, that's pretty.
Yeah.
That's what happens with Tesla. So I wholeheartedly support the product side of it. Now let's talk about the stock, because that is a little different. And Bo, I own all index funds pretty much, except for, I'm an index
Majority of your
mutual.
portfolio.
The majority of my investment portfolio is index funds, but I have one big exception. When I bought this car in 2018, I could tell something was different, so I bought some shares.
Sure.
And that's not because and by the way, this is not a pump and dump scheme where I'm trying to get you all excited about Tesla so I can make more. No, it's
I don't think your holding is big enough to move the stock price if you were to dump it.
Well, I mean, that's what I mean. It's a percentage of my net worth. It's a very
Sure.
small percentage, and it's just not. And my ownership is very small in the relative to where Tesla is. But I want to make sure I disclose that. So, but I think this is what is interesting to me about Tesla the stock. Tesla the stock, you can't separate the marriage of of Elon Musk and Tesla. They are. Why is Tesla so awesome? A lot of it is because Elon Musk is a visionary. I mean, the man is incredible, but he also, and look, I hope at some point I get to meet Elon, so I hope this video doesn't help me. He drives me crazy in some ways too, because he is
As a shareholder.
As a shareholder, because he's not always making decisions in the best interest of his companies. Without a doubt, I think Elon is a genius, but he doesn't always act in the best interest, and I have a perfect example. Tesla has the best network infrastructure on electric vehicles. They are way ahead of the curve. It is, and we even have a map of where they have superchargers.
It is well covered across the entire
you
country.
could easily go on road trips. You can easily drive across country because they have taken upon themselves without, the federal government didn't necessarily put these charging stations in place, because I know that's part of the new infrastructure deal. Tesla just did it. So that's a huge competitive advantage that should have a premium built in their price. Well, Elon Musk has come out and said, hey, I plan on opening up our charging network to all EVs because I believe in this whole renewable energy and trying to push things greener. He's a believer in that, so much so that I think he's willing to hurt the premium that could mean to his company.
Yeah, so as an investor, I'm hearing this. Tesla has a thing that they have a moat around. They have this protective guard around this thing. And rather than capitalizing on that to make their stock and their company and all their products more valuable, he's taking the stance, no, I'm going to use the word mission-based business, and we're not going to do that. We're going to open this up to other folks to actually make competition easier for the other entrants coming against our products. Am I defining that correctly?
Because if it moves the needle further to getting more people to adopt this cleaner energy, he wants to do that.
Sure.
So that leads to my second concern with Tesla as a company is that Elon, once again, you can't separate Tesla from the founder, Elon, is that he is so easily distracted. I mean, look, can we just talk about all the distractions that Elon has faced over? I mean, you don't even have to go that far back. I mean, as a matter of fact, we're going to show a screenshot in a second
Sure.
from just a few days ago. So, I mean, he kind of writes this himself. But over time, I mean, if you think about the fact that he has SpaceX, I mean, and we've all seen the rockets that land themselves back on, and it's pretty incredible. So I'm proud that Elon is so innovative that he not only can have Tesla, he can have SpaceX. Now he's working on world poverty, it sounds like, that they're doing things. But crypto, I mean, think about all the distractions he's had with crypto, with it's never ending. All the different things that Elon is willing to use a portion of his brain power. And that's why I think he is so, so brilliant that he doesn't necessarily connect with the standard world. He's working at a different level, and I think he feels like time is working against him, that he has to get it all done. Very similar to Steve Jobs and some other brilliant people that have come before him. But that is troubling from a shareholder value, and here's another example to show this. Elon, over the weekend, posted this crazy tweet. And what it was is he said, hey, I've been taking a lot of flack, recently because people are thinking about doing this billionaire tax. So he says, I'm going to get ahead of it. He says, much is made lately of unrealized gains being a means of tax avoidance. So I propose selling 10% of my Tesla stock. Do you support this? And he put a poll up, and he claims he's going to
honor the poll.
Honor this. Now, look, Daniel and I were talking about this behind the scenes. This might be more of a narrative. I don't know if he was actually going to exercise 10% of his ownership, but there was discussions that he probably had a bunch of non-qualifieds that were coming available soon. So maybe this is a smart hedge from Elon's sake. But I will tell you, I'm in this 3.5 million people who voted saying no, because I worry about if we do start taxing these billionaires, or if they start liquidating the shares, what does that have on the stock market in general? Because that could have some big impacts. But it just seems crazy that Elon is willing to get into this discussion and even go, try to, the trolls and all the people, the detractors, he engages with them. And I think that is not in the best interest of Tesla, the stock.
Yeah, so I think for you as a shareholder, what you're saying is when it comes to the CEO or the founder, the innovator in the company, you want them spending the majority of their brain space, their power on how to make the company more valued, how to make the products better, how to better serve that specific sector. And it seems like with Elon, he has his mind on a lot of different things in a lot of different directions. So because of that, does that mean that you're like, okay, well, I'm out on Tesla. I'm ready to sell the stock. I'm ready to get out of this. I'm ready to move on. Or is your position, no, I'm a stockholder and I want to keep being a stockholder, and why or why not?
I look at this as more of when I bought it, I made a promise to myself this was more of a permanent portfolio type holding, just because I believed in what they're doing. And look, and this leads to my third point of why I would be very concerned about being a Tesla stockholder, is that the price to earnings ratios are through the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, and I want to give you some examples here. We didn't make a slide out of this. We could have, but I think Daniel was going to kill me if I asked for another slide. So the price to earnings ratio right now of Tesla is 349.
Whew, that seems high.
Well, it seems high, and then you get even more context when you compare it to traditional auto manufacturers. If you look at General Motors, currently their price to earnings ratio is 7.7. Toyota is 5.4. Honda is 6.5. So you can see that Tesla is substantially higher. I mean, so there's a huge premium on Tesla right now. And that's one more reason why I don't love, I will tell you, and this I didn't want to go into a sidebar because the team was going to kill me, but this whole taxing of unrealized gains is a slippery slope because Tesla's had a huge run-up really in the last 24 months. And I think everything I've seen, Elon pays a lot of taxes when he actually exercises his options or when he sells the stock. Because I think even what was disclosed by ProPublica, he had reported $1.5 billion of income in like the year they had the tax leak on, and he paid $433 million. It was like a 30% tax rate. He was probably the least tax avoidance out of the other billionaires that they pulled in. But what the ProPublica did is that they went after how much his stock appreciated. Well, that's dangerous because you don't really have the money from that stock until you actually sell it. And that's something that I think we ought to be careful of. But my point is right now Tesla is at 349. Meanwhile, the rest of the industry is somewhere between 5 to 7. That means there's probably going to be a lot of volatility with the stock price of Tesla. So I would be, if it's something you feel committed to and you just want to be a part of it because you support what the technology and the innovation is, this is something you plan on holding for 10 years, 20 years. I mean, I think you could dabble, but with a small portion. Mm-hmm. But this is not something you should be buying your fundamental. This is the driver for your retirement. That could get kind of concerning, especially at these valuation levels.
So it sounds like, Brian, what you're saying is when it comes to investing, it's important to understand the why. What's the reason you are carrying out or perpetrating the strategy that you're carrying it out? If your goal is to try to make a really quick buck and ride the wave and do that sort of thing, our opinion is that's a bit of a futile exercise when it relates to individual stocks. But if you are going to do that, Tesla looks difficult from a valuation standpoint to accomplish that goal. However, if you are a fan of the product and you think that Tesla's best days are ahead of them as opposed to behind them, then it might not be a horrible holding to have inside of your portfolio. But notwithstanding either one of those, you are a staunch advocate for the product and you think the cars and the vehicles and automobiles they create are amazing cars and vehicles and automobiles.
No doubt. That's why I plan on probably in the not too distant future will be a 2-car family of electric vehicles, because I think the big turning point for the electric vehicle is when that range gets to 400 to 500 miles on a single charge. It's probably going to be pretty hard not to consider electric vehicles at that point, because that's getting to the range that for road trips and everything else that you don't have the anxiety from using an electric vehicle. And I think that's something to keep an eye on, and that's coming with the new battery technology that's quickly innovating.
So you guys know one of our very favorite things to do on these live stream Q&As with you is we like to answer your questions. Obviously, we're going to tell you what we think about Tesla, what we think about the products, what we think about the stock. But what we really care about is what is important to you. What questions do you have? What things do you want us to weigh in that might add value to your financial life? So right now, we have the team sitting out on the wings. If you have a question, make sure you get it in the chat. They're going to put it in front of us. And our goal for the rest of our time today is going to be to just load you guys up so that you can take your finances to the next level. This first question is from Denise. And Denise, this is a YouTube question. She said, if you had a crystal ball and you saw another 2008, 2009 looming on the horizon, I'm assuming she's talking about from like a downturn standpoint, what adjustments would you make today, if any, to your retirement portfolio when just 2 to 3 years until retirement? So it sounds like Denise is a few years away from retirement, but she's like, man, if I knew that next year was going to be 2008, what should I be thinking about or what should I be changing? How would you advise her? What sort of counsel would you give to Denise as she's entering in this new stage?
I think this is a great question, and for several reasons, because the narrative, and look, I get it, guys. Right now, it is so hard to invest without taking risk. I mean, because there's all kind of research out there that because interest rates are so low right now, it's pushing everybody to take more and more risk to try to get that return, that total return, that you feel like your money's not losing in value, especially as we face inflation and other things that are pulling on the value of what conservative holdings can do for you. But this is the part that I think is troubling in the trend I see, is because everybody's been pushed out on the risk spectrum. I see people who are saying and posting publicly that they're going to stay 90-10, 90% aggressive assets like index funds and so forth, 10% conservative all the way through their retirement. And that sounds good on paper when everything is working in your favor, but I always think about that slide that Daniel and I were working on where it shows the power of diversification, where it's not always how much you make, it's also how much you get to keep in those horrible downturns. And Denise brought up 2008 to 2009 to give perspective, because we have had enough time pass. I think a lot of people have forgotten that for the year, the S&P 500 lost 37% in 2008. But that doesn't tell the full story, because that's for the full year. If you just brought it into really that end part of third quarter and fourth quarter of 2008, There were periods where it was down over 50%.
Yep.
And that's if you're a person that's retiring in 2 to 3 years, that ought to petrify you. And petrify you in a good way, because it means hopefully it will drive you to proactive action right now. Because here's what I would tell you about asset allocation and adjustments. I don't care if we are facing a 2008 type collapse, or if we have actually the good recovery of a 2009 without the collapse of 2008. You still should ask yourself the exact same question Denise is doing, because this is why your asset allocation will change and evolve over time, because your goals for each pot of or asset allocation structure that you structure your investments with changes. So, I mean, when you're young, you get so excited about volatility, or you should, so you should be aggressive, because you have so many more years of saving and investing that when the stock market goes down, you should actually kind of start rubbing your hands together going, goody, goody, goody.
Yep.
I should be excited about this because I'm buying lower shares when I have so many years ahead to get all that compounding growth. The problem is when you get to 2 to 3 years from retirement, you now have a new risk to worry about. It's not just risk tolerance on what you can handle emotionally anymore. It's now what's called risk capacity, which is how fast or how long you can sustain your portfolio getting beaten up and not needing to pull assets out before you actually need to use them. Because let's say you're pulling money out for retirement, but you're pulling out when the stock market's down 30 to 50%, you're eating principal, and you're also eating away at a much faster pace than if you didn't have to touch it and you could let the money recover. And that's why we talk about risk capacity, is because if you're somebody who if you know an aggressive portfolio might take 3 years to recover to get back to zero, but your life expectancy or what you can count on for retirement is 10 to 15 years.
Don't have the time.
Those two, you don't have the time for all those things to work together. That's why I would tell you right now, Denise, don't create a portfolio thinking about the next 2008. Create a portfolio that actually reflects your goals, your needs. So it's kind of like, I've used this analogy before, is that you have different seasons of investment. We're kind of in the latter parts of summer, where everybody just loves the warm weather. You love the sunshine. You love the blue skies. But in the downturns of the bear markets are like, they're the winter, the coldest of the winters, where it's just miserable to go outside because you immediately, your fingers get cold and everything else. You need to dress appropriately when you're 2 to 3 years from retirement. It doesn't matter if it's sunny outside, if it's cold outside. You have an all-purpose structure that gets you through. You have enough liquidity and unrisked assets that it gets you through those periods that it's down, but you also have enough so that when you have the 20, 30, 40 years of retirement, that you still are getting some growth and appreciation. It's more of an all-weather, all-season type asset allocation. I want you to do that now. Don't worry about 2008. Worry about what's the all-season structure, and that's what I'm going to tee it up for Bo to kind of close out this question is, that's when maybe you need to take the relationship to the next level and close out the abundance cycle.
Yeah, what's really, really interesting is, we were doing this back in 2008 and 2009, and the market, like Brian said, lost 37%. It was a pretty scary time. Well, almost every client that has become a client of our firm since then has had some version of this statement. Whew, the market's done pretty good. I'm getting a little nervous, right? And so imagine that. Like in 2009, it rebounded, and they were looking for the second drop. And then 2010 and 11 and 12, 2013 was a great year. And then 14, 15, 16, all the way to 18, 19. It's been a really, really strong market. And so one of the things that we tell clients is we don't know when the next downturn is going to be. It may be 6 months from now, and it may be 6 years from now. You want a portfolio that's set up that whether it goes up 20% from here or down 20% from here, for your unique situation, it is set up correctly for what you hope to accomplish. It is difficult to make those adjustments, and this is what I think is really, really interesting, and I think it surprises a lot of folks. We don't think that portfolio adjustments happen rapidly. It's not like you are an 80-20 portfolio the day before you retire, and then you become a 20-80 portfolio. What actually happens is there's sort of a glide path where about 5 years out, you should begin to naturally make some adjustments. And then even as you get 5 years into retirement, you should continue making adjustments. So it is a slow change in your portfolio makeup. It's not an apple cart turnover. And I think a lot of people try to approach it as though it were. Well, you said, Brian, your portfolio doesn't need to just last for the first year of retirement or first 3 years of retirement. It needs to last for most folks 20, 30, even 40 years. So you have to make sure the way that you approach that is well thought out and well strategized, because a really, really good plan will be good before the downturn. It'll be good during the downturn, and it will continue to be good after the downturn. Now, for a lot of folks who are approaching that time, that's a great place where it might make sense to take your relationship to the next level. We love helping folks figure out, am I ready for retirement? How do I cross that threshold? And then how do I move in and through it seamlessly, no matter what the financial world throws at me? So if that's something you're interested in, you can definitely check out our website, moneyguide.com, check out the firm website, aboundwealth.com, and we would love to talk with you about that. That was a great question, Denise, and congratulations for retirement on the horizon. All right, this next question, Brian, is from Darren. Darren said, assuming you save 25% of your income, how do you decide how much to allocate to each of the 3 buckets? You know, because we talk about this 3-bucket strategy in retirement. After maxing out Roth and employer match, what dictates where your next dollar goes?
So you guys know we love the 3-bucket strategy. Bo he has really kind of gotten some traction with discussing this, and we have our after-tax, which is your taxable brokerage account. It could be an individual account, a joint account, even like a revocable trust type thing that you have access that you can pull money to and from. You have your tax deferred. That's where your employer match from like your 401ks, your 403bs, as well as if you're saving pre-tax traditionally. That's also going to be in that tax deferred bucket. We love it because you're getting a tax deduction by not paying taxes on any of your wages that you're putting into those plans. They grow tax deferred, but the bad part is when you pull it out, you're going to pay an ordinary income tax rates. And then that 3rd bucket is tax free. That's all your Roth holdings. That can be your Roth 401k, Roth 403b, as well as your Roth IRAs, HSAs, those type of things where you have the opportunity to grow those assets and never pay Uncle Sam a dime on the growth. So it's pretty powerful stuff. So the question that Darren is asking is, how do you structure the allocation of what you get? I mean, the ideal, if we were facing the ability, I would tell you I'd want 100% of my assets to be in the Roth bucket.
Okay.
But, that doesn't work.
It's kind of hard to do that based on limits and income thresholds.
The government, first of all, restricts how much money you can put into those tax-free accounts. If you think about like Roth IRAs, they'll go let you put in $6,000 if you're under 50. HSAs, they're going to let you put in a little over $7,000 for a family. They put restrictions on those things. Even 401ks and so forth, if you had the ability to do Roth, you can only do $19,500. Those are the restrictions they're going to put on you. And because of those restrictions, you're going to find that your 3-bucket strategy is going to kind of happen naturally. And that's why we focus. And look, the way it's going to happen, we kind of talk about when we do the financial order of operations. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, or if you go to learn.moneyguy.com, you can see our financial order of operations course. And it just naturally is going to help you. You're going to have the after-tax bucket with your cash reserves and in your emergency fund, and then you're going to have your tax deferred with your free employer match. Plus, if you're in a higher tax bracket, what you're putting in there in contributions to your 401k and 403b at your employer plan, and then your tax free is going to grow because we load it up in step 5 with the Roth IRAs, the HSAs, and then step 6 when you're maxing out retirement accounts. That's either going to be in the tax deferred or it's going to be in the tax free because you're going to go and load up the $19,500. It's not really until you get to step 7, which is hyperaccumulation, where we have a lot of people come to us in their 30s, 40s, and even early 50s, where it's not uncommon that the majority of their 3 buckets are in the tax deferred and the tax free. And we always say, hey, you told me you're going to try to retire at 55. Where's your bridge account? How are you going to pay? How are you going to get access to money to pay the bills to retire early when all of your money is in these retirement accounts that are kind of locked up for a period of time? 59 and a half, 55 on others. There's different restrictions on how long you've held them. You need something like after-tax money to get you there, and that's why we do focus on that at step 7. So Darren, I feel like I've answered a question with a question, and I hate that, but I hopefully giving you enough understanding is that what we naturally see is that the how generous your employer is, your tax situation, and just what's been presented from an income standpoint to you and your family is what structures those buckets. Originally, it's when you get past step 6 of the financial order of operations that you take a more active role and start shaping it to build that bridge account.
And here's what I love about the financial order of operations. It's sort of a guardrail that's going to allow you to know what to do with your next dollar at each age and stage of life. And what's beautiful is as your circumstances change, how you tackle the financial order of operations might change. While you are early and young in your journey, maxing out your employee retirement plan might mean doing the Roth portion. But you may find that later on, as your income changes, or maybe you move to a state that has state income tax, or maybe you decide that you do want to retire early, how you fund those different buckets and how you build your buckets will adjust. So I would always encourage someone, if you've done the financial order of operations and you feel like you've got it and you did it 3 or 4 years ago, it's probably not a horrible idea to revisit that and kind of walk back through and say, am I doing everything the best, most optimal way that I can for where I am right now? Because how you fund those tax buckets will change through time. Great question, Darren. This next question is from David. It's a Tesla question. David said, I got lucky and invested in Tesla prior to the big 2020 run. Now my IRA has over 50% Tesla stock. I believe it will move higher over the next 30 years or so. Should I rebalance? I have FOMO on more gains. So this is a great question. Now he's asking specifically about Tesla. He bought one and it hit, and now it represents 50% of his IRA. I don't know how much of his total portfolio that is, but 50% of his IRA. What advice do you give to someone who's had something hit? Maybe it's not they bought Tesla, but maybe they work for a company where a lot of their compensation, maybe they were an early employee at a tech company, and now a big chunk of their worth is in a single stock or a single holding. And while they're still excited about the holding, there's probably some risk that they ought to think about as it relates to that, right?
This is hard, and David, I don't know your specific situation, so I think it's best if I just give you parameters to consider, because Bo was kind of alluding to it. Look, there is a risk being too concentrated. I mean, I think that is something you need to be very aware of, because I have personally worked with executives for high-flying technology companies when I lived in Atlanta and worked for a large firm. We did a lot of benefits and other things for those executives, and on paper, here's another problem with these unrealized gains that you hear that people in Washington want to tax right now, is on paper, a lot of people had a lot of net worth, but it never turned out to actually be, realized to them because the company got crushed. And, whether, at that time it was the dot-com bubble that burst that took out a lot of these companies. And that is a concern, because, I mean, earlier on this show, I read out the price-earnings ratio of Tesla was well into the 300s. That's not normal. So that probably is a good indicator that there's a lot of volatility that's built into this stock. Here's why I'm struggling with this is because, I have a conflict on this, is because I own some Tesla, and I think I should disclose that, and it's a 20-bagger. I mean, I have made 20 times what my initial investment is on Tesla, so I know exactly what David's talking about, is because you don't have to put a lot into something if you make a 20-fold increase in it it turns into a material play. For me, and I'm going to speak for myself personally, it's not hard for me to hold this because, fortunately, as a percentage of my net worth, it's still not a part where I feel like I have concentration risk. But if I was somebody that you looked at your total investment assets that will hopefully be your retirement, if this stock is 50 to 60%, and this is what's going to determine, hey, can I retire someday, that's concerning. I mean, because that puts you in heavy concentration risk. So I just want you to take that into account when you're looking at, because there's nothing wrong with taking some gains and diversifying and taking the win if that's what you need this money for. And I think for a lot of people, if you got lucky and you're young, this is a huge head start.
Sure.
But if you're somebody who loves it and it's just a small percentage and you just feel committed from a permanent portfolio standpoint, I'm okay if you hold it, but I can't give that advice to David until I knew specifically what the why and what this meant to his total financial life was.
Yeah, I think one of the most dangerous things, for investors is our own emotions, both the emotions of fear and the emotions of greed. And I think you even called it FOMO here. And so one of the things, whenever we approach financial decisions, specifically investment decisions, where we're at an impasse, oh man, this has done really, really well, and I'm nervous it could go away, but if I sell it, I'm really nervous I'm going to miss out on future gains. We like to put systems and strategies in place that try to remove the emotion from it. So just like if someone were to receive an inheritance or sell a business and they come to us with a lot of cash, we recommend a strategy where they dollar cost average that cost into the market over a consistent period of time. Well, if you have a really large holding that's done very, very well, and you recognize you need to start mitigating some of that exposure, one of the things that you can do is come up with a systematic divesting strategy where on a stated basis, maybe it's monthly, maybe it is quarterly, maybe it's annually, you sell a portion of that holding. What that allows you to do is take some of those gains off the table, but then you still maintain exposure if the stock continues to go well. If you're someone who happens to hold this in a taxable account, because I think that you said yours was held inside an IRA, you ought to really do some tax planning and figure out, okay, well, should I sell enough to hit the next, whatever that threshold is, whether it's an income threshold or whether it's triggering Medicare stuff, whatever that thing is, you should recognize how much wiggle room you have in the bracket in which you're operating to figure out how much should I sell. And so we have a lot of clients who come to us and maybe they have company stock or whatever the case may be, where we will systematically divest. We'll say, hey, our goal is over the next 5 years, we want to make sure that this holding is no more than 10% of your total investment portfolio. Well, what naturally ends up happening as we work through that 5 years, if the stock continues to do well, it takes us a little bit longer than 5 years, or we have to increase how much we're selling. I think that if you can put systems and strategies in place to remove the emotions from it, you will protect yourself from second guessing, overreacting, making snap judgments, doing knee-jerk reactions, and you will protect your financial wealth building long-term if you can do that. Great question. All right, this next question, and that one was from David. Great question, David. This next question is from Aaron. Aaron said, my wife and I received a $25,000 inheritance. It was from her side of the family, so she feels more ownership of it. I want to invest some of it. She wants to pay off our 2.8% mortgage and remodel our home. How do I navigate investing over spending it on our home? So there's a lot packaged up in this question, Brian. How do we think about assets that come in from inheritance? What should we think about and how should we navigate those assets? And then even how do you make the decision on using those for the future versus using those for the present?
I like questions like this, Aaron, because I have a visual of you and your wife watching this
They're like on the edge of they're like, we're going to let these guys decide.
You'll use this as a tool to kind of hopefully mediate your discussion. First of all, I think it's very important, and this is something I would do this in my household, and I hope you would consider it with yours, is that there's a legal protection to inherited assets. Mm-hmm. So if my wife came into an inheritance of $25,000, I would probably, I see nothing wrong with her opening up an individual account to put that money into, just because the government treats that differently. Mm-hmm. Look, and our marriage is rock solid. It's just, it is a legal protection, that's out there. So in reality, she does have some additional ownership. Mm-hmm. For Aaron, just being full disclosure. Even the law recognizes that if there was ever creditors, others that could have a say on this, they're going to treat those assets different than wages that come into the joint account for the family. So be mindful of that. Now, I do think, and this is what I would say, because if your wife is trying to pay down a 2.8% mortgage, there's more at play here, because the way you need to look at this, Aaron, is that y'all have a discussion as a family, because even though these assets might go into a separate account in your wife's name, they're still part of the whole big pizza pie that y'all consider your capital as a family. And this is what y'all need to have a kind of a plan. You need to sit down and have those what initially start out as boring date nights where you're just getting over the basics, and hopefully turn this into sexy date nights later when you're figuring out how you can go on trips and travel and do all the exciting things that, if you've used money well, can do for a family and a relationship. But I do want you to kind of use this as an opportunity to start talking about what does the next dollar need to be spent or invested or consumed on for my household. And that's why, we talk about the financial order of operations. That's probably a great place for you guys to look at. But talk about it, communicate well, because as a guy who's been married and I'm in my third decade of marriage, communication is so powerful. And a lot of the things you might be thinking, you might not have expressed openly to your spouse, and a lot of things she's thinking might not be openly expressed to you. And that's why it's good if y'all can talk about it and then create that plan for where the next dollar goes, so you don't have a complete disconnect. It sounds like y'all are at least having a discussion, because you know what she wants to do with the money. So then that's where I'll give the nudge that you'll like. So I'm giving everybody a little something that'll make them smile in this discussion, because here's where I think I want to make the point for Aaron. If you guys are under 45 and you have a 2.8% mortgage, which is super low historically, and we're also in this inflationary period where everything is costing more and more money, and more than likely your primary residence is appreciating rapidly, I worry that maybe that money would be better spent investing for the future because of the compounding growth opportunity. Because you're putting that money into Roth dollars, if you're putting that money into something that can grow, that is money that's going to serve you for decades and beyond, even in retirement. Whereas once you pay down the mortgage, it feels good, but it's locked into that just equity of the house, and it just, those army of dollars aren't working as hard. Now, if you're over 45, I completely agree with prepaying the mortgage if that's what you so choose to do, if assuming you've made it through the other financial order of operation steps where you're saving 25% for the future and other things. Because I get, as you get older, you want to simplify your life. You want to actually own your life so you have true financial independence. Having encumbrances like debt in retirement is the exact opposite of independence, which is what you're trying to build. So that's the difference between how you ought to approach this. We had answered an earlier question where we talked about over your life, there's a glide path of your relationship with risk and reward. While you're young, you need to be maximizing the growth of your assets, because the risk is you're not saving enough that it will be there for you in retirement. As you get closer to retirement, the risk is that you don't have enough time for it to recover if it goes down. You need to balance those two things in that fear-greed battle that's constantly going on with risk and reward.
But here's the beautiful part about money and about financial planning. Money is nothing more than a tool that allows you to do the things that you want to do in the way that you want to do them. And the other really fortunate thing is there's not a single path to wealth. I have a lot of friends, Brian, that are younger, and they've made the decision previously in life that they're going to pay off their mortgage. And they are now in their late 30s, early 40s, completely debt-free, mortgage-free. Was that the most optimal financial decision for them? Maybe not from a mathematical standpoint. However, the peace of mind that it gave them, and now the laser focus they have on making up for lost time, they're still going to be okay. Right? And so if you recognize inside of your marriage, this is like a really serious area of contention, and you say, sweetheart, no, we have to invest these dollars, and she says, no, we have to pay off the mortgage, there's probably some middle ground there, and you're going to be okay. It's okay living in that middle ground, because what's always mathematically optimal might not be exactly lifestyle and life circumstance optimal. So that's why it's really important to write down your goals and figure out, are the decisions we're making getting us closer and closer to those goals, whatever they may be.
I was out of town with a group of friends at that SEMA show last week, and I had an incident that happened. My wife's car was getting worked on. I mean, well, it fits into this.
Yeah.
And we found out because of supply chain issues, the brake pads that are available, you can't buy them from normal places where they cost $300 or $400. The only place you can buy brake pads now for some cars is through the dealerships, and they charge 2 to 3 times more. I mean, it's not like 20% more. They actually charge 100 to 200% more for the same products you used to be able to buy after, somewhere else. But the supply chain's blown all that up. And I was panicking because I am just the type of person, I don't like wasting my dollars.
Sure.
I think you can sense this is not an act, guys, what we do on this show. And my buddy who owns the auto restoration and repair shop, so I had an expert on brake pads right to my right. He's like, dude, what are you worried about? He goes, the relationship is much more important than this. He said, just pay the premium on the brake pads because this is the situation we're in with the supply chain, and don't create a bigger problem. And I thought it was just such powerful advice. So I would tell Aaron, it's not always, and this ties into what Bo was saying, maximization. You need to realize there's a balance, especially in a relationship, between communication, happiness, and then maximization. And sometimes us financial mutants, we want to maximize every dollar.
That's right.
To the point that it can actually cause harm. And remember, there's that balance between being a miser or causing problems. Try to respect that, and I needed that to hear that from my friend, because then I called my wife back and I was like, yeah, let's just buy the premium. It's not going to break the bank. We'll be okay. It's just unfortunate in this current state of time. But it saved me and my wife from having probably a fight over something that truthfully it didn't even matter.
That's
and
right.
that's probably the biggest part to understand about money. Don't let it be a divider. Let it be something that's a builder in your relationship.
Love it. All right, Brian, this next question is from Christian. Christian said, I'm 25. How do I balance saving to enjoy retirement versus saving to enjoy life pre-retirement? I want the tax benefits of retirement accounts, but I want to invest now for pre-59 and a half life too. So I think his question is kind of twofold. How do I balance living in the present today as well as saving for retirement? But how do I also balance like saving for retirement and saving for stuff that I might want to do in the future, like nice trips or maybe upgrading the house or buying a jet ski, or I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing some things out there.
Yeah, I think this is a great question, Christian. And I've talked about this before, and I'll just go over some. I call it bedazzle your basic life.
Love it.
And here's what I mean by bedazzle your basic life is, look, when you're in your 20s, I'm just going to be honest with you, you're not supposed to have everything. That's why when I get questions, like from a 23-year-old and I want to go buy my Tesla, I'm always like, why would you do that right so early? Because the hedonic treadmills go ruin things for you. If you start at the tippity top, you'll miss out on so much of the journey of money and building, as that you enjoy each step in the process. But there is a balance there, because I don't want you being such a miser that you're saving 70% of your income because you have this daydream that when you retire at 55, now you'll go do all the things, because you'll find that you feel completely different at 55 than you do at 25 from a health, energy, and everything else. So I think there is a balance between making sure you're attacking each decade of your life for maximization, but don't mishear me. Because when you're trying to attack to enjoy, I still want you balancing the savings, and this is why I say bedazzle your basic life. I want you creating memories, but I think you have to be realistic about it. It's just like my experience on this is, in my late 20s, my wife and I decided we were going to go to Europe, to Italy. We did it cheap. I mean, so cheap that we literally are dragging our luggage through cobblestone streets. I felt like we got ripped off in every town by the locals. We were not necessarily eating at the best restaurants, but we got to see all the major sites. I mean, every city you want to talk about in Italy that we toured, we saw all the same things. So to the point that even now, as I'm approaching 50, everybody else I've talked to who's been to Italy, our experiences on these sites are no different.
Very similar, yeah.
It's just I have a much more entertaining story as I talk about all the ridiculousness of doing that trip so cheap. But since we had never done Europe before, it was okay that it was done cheap. Because now when I go closer to 50 to Europe, I'll probably have the tour guides. I'll do everything instead of just dragging your stuff and doing everything where you just don't have it all figured out. But that's the part, because here's the great thing about memories. They actually blossom. They get better with time. So even the things that drive you crazy in the moment might actually turn out to be that color or excitement that actually entertains you and actually makes it even a better experience. And I still look back and I think, look, even though I did that trip so cheap, I did it. And I didn't sacrifice saving for retirement. I think the problem sometimes as people who are on this journey, especially in your 20s and 30s, is you're trying to do it all. You're trying to, because and the problem is social media has made it
the world in which we live in.
It's distorted everything, because you see somebody who's in, they go to Bora Bora and they're in their 20s and they look all great in their bikinis and stuff. And you're like, well, I should do that too. No, you should probably be in Cancun, Mexico with that $3,000 vacation instead of going to Bora Bora that might cost $25,000.
Yep.
There's a big difference. You still get a great vacation and experience. It's just one's going to allow you to maximize your Roth IRA and still build the memories. Focus on being very efficient with your decision making, but put not only value for saving and investing for the future, but put value in building and enjoying each decade too. And that's the balance and the superpower that's going to really serve you well in life.
Yeah, the guardrail that we give is get yourself to saving 25%, and then you can free yourself of spending guilt. This is what I've told my wife, sweetheart, if we can just hit our 25% and pay ourselves first, then it's okay if we want to upgrade this or decorate this room or go on this trip or have this thing, because we know we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. That's why the 25% is there. So figure out how to get your savings right there and then free yourself from the guilt of getting to do the things now that you really enjoy and that you want to enjoy. That was a great question, Christian. All right, David asked this next question, Brian. David said, hey guys, I'm getting married next year. Congratulations. I work in network security and make $112,000. I do 15% with my 401k with a 6% match, and I max out my Roth IRA. Once married, should we open another Roth IRA for her? So we don't know a whole lot about their situation. We know how much he makes. We don't know if she works or what the circumstance is. But when it comes to building assets for newlyweds, are there any thoughts you have around like whose accounts you fund and how that could manifest at some point later on in a marriage?
Yeah, now, look, I think that it's important. Like I said, I'm in my third decade of marriage. It's one of those unique things where maybe my thoughts are a little more traditional, so I'll let you be the younger person
Sure.
if you have a different thought on anything. But I do love the fact that once you're married, that you're thinking of the money coming into the household as both of your money, because that served me well. I think there's nothing wrong with, especially if you're in a later marriage and you have assets, from just previously in life. It's okay that you treat some of those things because they're legally protected in a certain way separate. But once you're married, all the assets that you're kind of creating while you're married, you ought to really be, thinking about them as a joint effort.
Sure.
And so when I hear a situation where you like, I'm assuming you obviously are the breadwinner since you said you're 112, but didn't mention your spouse's income. You're the primary breadwinner. There's still an opportunity, and when you think about like the financial order of operations, step 5 is tax-free growth. The government restricts all tax-free growth opportunities. Roth IRAs only let you put $6,000 a person in. The HSAs is a little over $7,000 if you're a family. So if you've maxed out your Roth IRA at $6,000, but your wife or spouse has not, you have the ability to use your earned income to also fund your spouse's. You ought to think about doing that as a household. And I think that's the important thing, is that if you look at those assets that are coming into the marriage as assets as the household, you can then try to make those maximization decisions for where the next dollar should go for your family.
Yeah, and look, I'm sort of a financial mutant, so I got really excited about this. My wife is she's 2 years younger than me, and so I understand how $1 can turn into 88 for a 20-year-old. By the time they get to 65. If you want to know about that, go check out our deliverable, How Powerful Are Your Dollars, moneyguy.com/resources. I recognize that every dollar we put into my wife's Roth IRA can probably grow bigger than mine because she has a little bit more time on her side. So when we first got married, I don't think at the time I was maxing out an employer-sponsored retirement plan, and so I did not try to work through the financial order of operations for myself and then double back and start working on hers. We made the decision, no, let's both fund Ross. Let's both do. At the time, it might have been $100 a month or $200 a month, whatever the number was, and we wanted to start building those assets, and we kept doing that even after we'd made the decision to have kids, and she opted to work at home with the children. She decided to stay in the home, but she's still working. And honey, if you're listening to this, I know that you're still working because it's the hardest job in the world. She made that decision. We still, even after we made that decision, still made the decision to build up accounts because we wanted to take advantage, exactly like you said, of the Roth IRA. So make sure you're taking advantage of all those opportunities. if you have a spouse and maybe they have some sort of like side income or they're doing something like that, don't forget you can do retirement accounts for them too. You can open up solo 401ks or SEP IRAs. There are really exciting ways when you have two members of a household to really take advantage of the tax opportunities available to you. Marriage is a great mechanism to allow you to really legally sock away tax-incented dollars.
That's right.
Great question, David. All right, this next one is from Aaron. And Aaron says, how do you account for unknowns in financial planning? I will eventually get inheritance, but don't know when or how much. But it also seems wrong to completely ignore that, right? So we see this all the time. Folks who know that their parents have done well, and it seems likely they'll have an inheritance at some point, but they don't know when, so it's hard to project. But how do you plan for that? And how do you think about that? Do you have any like experience shares with like how that factors
I would actually ask, I want to hear how you would start this, because I think you do a better job. I am I'll just give my short answer and then you fill in, because I think you would do a great job with this, is that I think most people should just not even count on the parents' wealth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to go, I think you showed me a Shaq quote.
Yeah.
Where
He said,
his kids were asking about their wealth. There's some quote, and I'm probably screwing it up, but they were talking about the wealth of the family, and he goes,
He said, we ain't rich.
Yeah.
I'm rich.
And I think that's an important thing, because you never know what a parent is going to decide to do with their estate. And I also think it's a little dark to be counting on that. So I want you to focus on building your own wealth first. But you do a better job, Bo, of maybe that's too just old school. I mean, I'll let
agree
you
with
give
that.
the nuance on that.
Again, it's not uncommon when we work with clients. We work with clients all across the spectrum, and some of them are generational wealth clients. It passes from one generation to the next and to the next. And one of the things what I would say is you don't want to build your plan upon the fact that something has to happen at a certain date or by a certain time for your plan to work, because then it gets you pulling for some really weird stuff. So what we always encourage our clients is this: hey, if you can focus on saving 25% of your gross income, and you can focus on living inside of your means that you're able to generate and create on your own, if there are other things that are coming into the fray, like perhaps you have parents that are like working on annual gifting strategies, so perhaps your income is, I'm going to say, subsidized by parents gifting money to you, that's great. Don't allow that to accelerate your lifestyle. Allow that to accelerate your savings behavior. Allow that to accelerate your wealth building potential if it's one of those situations. If it's an inheritance, I always try to tell folks, let's build your plan not taking that into consideration, so that if something does happen at some point in the future, perhaps it unlocks other opportunities. Maybe we're not going to plan on upgrading the house at this point, but if this thing were to happen and there were money to come in, maybe those are the dollars we'll use to fund that. But in terms of keeping the lights on, covering the mortgage, paying the bills, doing all the things you want to do, you want to make sure that you can build that up on your own without having to count on, your parents kicking it or your spouse's parents kicking it in order to make those things possible. And what that's going to allow you to do is if you can steward a little bit, right, what you have presently really, really well, when those dollars do come in at some point in the future, you will be much better positioned to manage those well. And we see this all the time, Brian. We have clients who they end up getting an inheritance. Like, man, I don't need this, right? Like we got this money, but we're set, and we've already. Man, this is going to provide us a great opportunity to do some of the giving stuff that maybe we couldn't have done otherwise, or to help our kids out with down payments on houses, or helping pay for school, or funding 529s. If you're on really solid foundational financial footing, it's going to allow you to do more as those things happen than just, looking at your watch, waiting for a negative event to turn into a net positive for you.
Well, and also, I think it lets you remain that intent that we know that the dollars you save and invest in your 20s and 30s have a exponential compounding opportunity than 40s and 50s and 60s for sure.
That's right.
So what I don't want to see is that your family has money, so you kind of miss out on those peak compounding growth opportunity years because you're kind of looking over at their plate and what they have, when you should be using that opportunity to maximize, because it's just there's a risk there counting that money before it's actually you have a string attached to it.
And unless you've had the conversation, and this is a scary one, I've had friends reach out to me before and say, hey, my mom and dad, they got money. Mom and dad, they've always had money. I really want them to talk to you, Bo. And I end up talking with the parents. And it turns out the parents do not have as much money as the kids thought that they had. Make sure you have realistic expectations. Or perhaps, you think that, oh, mom and dad are going to leave all their money to me. But mom and dad might have committed those dollars elsewhere for other purposes to go in different directions. So make sure you understand the basis of the things that you're counting on before you just start counting those eggs before they hatch.
That's a great point.
Aaron, that was a great question. This next question is from Mary. Mary says, my husband says to attack the mortgage and pay off the house early.
It's noticing a trend.
I disagree and want to add more money towards our kids' 529 accounts. We've maxed out all of our retirement accounts. Which one is better? He's in his mid-40s. I am in my mid-30s. So we got two different ages here to take into account. So do you prepay mortgage, attack that and knock that out, or do you fund 529s, and how do you decide which of those to do?
Well, Mary's given us a few more breadcrumbs here that actually makes this a very intriguing question, because I can already tell, based upon how Mary has structured this question, because we know with the financial order of operations, you don't even really consider mortgage payoff until you get to step 9, which is low interest debt, which is what mortgage debt is.
Yep.
This is 2 to 3% range. Well, then Mary threw in another interesting thing, is talking about funding the kids. 529s. Well, that's a step 8 of the financial order of operations. All those things occur after you made it through step 1 through 7, which means you've got your emergency reserves taken care of. You maximize all the retirement savings opportunities with the Roth IRAs, the HSAs, and all that great stuff. So you've even got to step 7, which is the hyperaccumulation, where you're thinking about the 3 bucket strategy. So all those boxes, I'm assuming, based upon the way Mary asked the question, have been checked. So now we get to a very interesting of who's right. Help us break this tie of, should we be saving more for the kids, or should we be prepaying this low interest debt, especially since my husband is over 45.
He's in his mid-40s, yep.
You've told me he's probably in that stage where he wants to simplify his financial life, and you guys have given permission. Guys, this is a tougher one because you've done so well on so many of your financial decisions. So I think it's more of a relationship of discussing what's the why, what's the goal on what you expect out of kids and education, is because we have had a number of clients where they come in and they say, I want my kids to pay for half of their college.
Sure.
Because I think they ought to have some skin in this discussion, and so so they don't just goof off in college like so many people seem like they do, and they're there for 6 years and have nothing to show for it. They'll take it much more serious if they have their money. Or maybe you're the type of family and parents and you say, I want my kids to hit the ground running, come out of college completely debt-free. You and your husband are going to have those discussions. Figure out what your why is, what the purpose is, what the goals are, because then you can back into what you need to be funding for the kids, and then now that's a much more relevant number to how fast you want to pay off the mortgage. Because, and Bo talks about this all the time. He does a good job of saying it's not an absolute thing either or.
That's
a lot of times you can do a little bit of both. So maybe you and your husband decide, you know what, maybe the actual real goal that we ought to consider is that by the time he's 50, he wants to be completely debt-free, and that gives us 4 to 5 years to prepay this mortgage. That's a much more consumable option, to advance it. And maybe that also allows, now we throw a few $100 extra to the kids' college. That's a win-win situation, and I still think it respects steps 8 and 9 of the financial order of operations, that you can also go download at moneyguy.com/resources, or go get the full course at learn.moneyguy.com.
I have literally nothing to add to that.
Well, good. That makes me feel like I kind of filled up a lot of the answer bucket
you
there.
That was awesome. All right, this next question is from Justin Brian, not Justin Brian, Justin, Brian. At Money Guy Show, my friend is in his late 20s, and he recently told me his housing exceeds 50% of his income. What would you tell him while he is starting his investing journey? So it's a young person in his 20s, and his friend heard our show, and 50% sounds like that's too much.
Yeah, I mean, well, we get these type of questions, and first of all, I think we get a bad rap because we tell people we don't want your housing to be more than 25% of your gross income when I'm talking about the principal and interest. And so those
Or
just
your rent
basic,
payment.
or your rent payment. And a lot of people go, well, I live in a coastal community. I live in California. I live in New York. There's no way I can get away with 25%. I understand that. I kind of get that. Look, this is a rule, but you might live in a unique area that has it. But what I always want to ask before I just am willing to give the grace of saying, hey, you're right. You've done everything that you can. It's just your number's going to be higher. I always first question, have you really done everything you can to make sure that number's as low as possible? Because like I went to a physical therapist recently. I had a tweak in my back that I needed some help with, and I found out even though she's doing great professionally, she has roommates. She bought a house, and then I guess you would call it a house hack, is that she's brought in
Love it.
Roommates through a college that she's affiliated with, where she does some consulting and teaching there. So they bring in students of the program to stay at her house, and I was like, that's brilliant, because you've taken something, because Nashville's not the cheapest cost of living area. She's turned that into a way to lower something that would probably be a much higher expense out of her house, and where it's much more consumable for her by having roommates. And you see this type of thing. I always say, are you making sure that 50% number is minimized as much, whether it's roommates, house hacking, or whatever the opportunities are? Look at that before you just say, you know what, this area is just so high and expensive. I'm just not going to be able to save because I'm at 50%.
Look, this is cold water, but sometimes cold water is a good thing. You really have two options when it comes to like your finances and budgetary ideas. You can either find a way to make more money, right? So maybe that's picking up a second job, maybe that's doing some sort of side gig, maybe that's becoming creative and innovative at your place of work, or you can spend less money. You can lower your expenses. Roommates is a great way to do that. Or perhaps you have to make the decision, and sometimes this is hard. I've had buddies before where they say, Bo, I heard your 23.8 thing. My car is just it's way more expensive. I'm nowhere near that. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, man. You probably ought to sell that car. You probably ought to get rid of that car and get into something less expensive, more affordable. Sometimes with our housing, that's necessary. We've had friends who've moved into a community, and they live at the really, really nice apartment complex, and they pay the exorbitant rent so that they can have the granite countertops and the hardwood floors and the high ceilings, where perhaps for this time, it makes a little more sense to go somewhere a little more affordable.
I'll bring up, because you and I have known each other for decades.
Oh
now,
boy,
and it's
know where this is going.
And when you moved to this area, y'all did not have a house yet. You rented.
We sold our house in Atlanta
and I came up here on one of those due diligence trips when y'all were moving up to the Nashville area, and we went to one apartment complex that it was exactly what you described. It had doorways. It wasn't the 8-foot doors. It was big, 9, 10. I don't even know how tall these doors. Beautiful doorways.
2-story hardwoods.
2 stories. It had hardwoods. It had granite everywhere. But it was about $400 to $500 more a month than the place that y'all ended up at, that had carpet.
That was just fine.
Had Formica countertops.
Yeah.
I mean, it had the normal 8-foot doorways. And we had a discussion. You also, your wife and you obviously, but you can't help but talk to your other fellow financial mutant.
Yep.
And we talked about what's the purpose, what's the why for this housing decision. And it just didn't make sense to pay that $500 a month premium
for nothing,
for the nicer fixtures and upgrades. Well, that stuff's going to come naturally.
That's right.
It's just it was kind of getting your life out of order, and making sure you are paying attention to where your next dollar, what should be prioritized to maximize, but also make sure you're doing everything to enjoy life too. Because I don't feel like you had a lesser experience because you lived a mile and a half down the street.
Nope.
You just had a much lower payment, and more than likely, yes, the granite and the hardwoods have been great for the first month and a half, but after a while, you'd be like,
it's just countertop.
It's my apartment. I don't own this place. I'm just paying rent here. You absorb that. That's part of that hedonic treadmill that I'm always talking about. We as humans can absorb and process faster than you realize. That's why you should enjoy each one of the steps of life that let you go nicer and nicer. Don't do too much too soon. Otherwise, you might find you hit the top, and now you're like, wow, what's next? And that's a sad thing too.
Absolutely. So that's what we would tell your buddy. All right, Brian asked this next question. And Brian says, I'm following the 23.8 advice, but my auto loan interest rate is only 2.25%. Should I use extra money to pay it down, or should I increase my 401k contributions? I don't have any match. So should I pay off my, I'm doing 23.8, 2.25%. Should I pay off my auto loan, or should I go and max out my 401k?
I see this question. People talk about when we do any of the car shows or mention anything with debt with 23.8. People are like, I'm a financial mutant. I've got 0% interest rate on my car. Why would I ever prepay this? And I get it. I mean, I think you guys are understanding that, yes, there's an incremental decision that's going on between the low interest rate. But I'm primarily, when I'm talking about low interest debt on step 9, I'm talking about your house, because that's pretty stable in valuation. And recently it's been appreciating rapidly, actually. I'm not necessarily talking about that auto loan, because in addition, now look, trolls, go ahead. I know you're waking up. You're like, ooh, time to climb out of my bridge here. You're going to say cars appreciate right now. This is a window in time, guys. We're in a very unique, inflationary period where, yes, cars are actually getting more expensive right now. This won't last. So be careful if you think trees grow to heaven, because it will definitely be a moment in time. In normal times, what I don't like about vehicles is they depreciate like a rock. It's not uncommon after 5 years of ownership that you've lost 50% of your value in the car you bought. So you have to take that into account in your decision-making process. So that's why if you have a low interest rate, I think there's nothing wrong if you want to structure and calculate what the payment is to pay it off within 36 months, and then stick to that, amortization table. Make your payments on that. But above and beyond that, I don't want you financing this car for 6 years, 7 years at the super low interest rate and slowing out the pay down of it so you can go load up on the Roth and other things, because I think you run into the risk in traditional times that you might be underwater in that car, and that's just not a healthy thing. So I would have you balance the 3 years with hyper-funding those retirement accounts like the Roth and so forth.
Yeah, and you had mentioned this alternative of paying that down or increasing your 401k. Well, 2.25%, I think you mentioned, that qualifies as low interest, even though that's not often what we're talking about. So there is a tax benefit from doing the 401k if you're doing pre-tax, or even if you're doing Roth, there's a future tax benefit, and that happens earlier in the financial order of operations. All right, confession time, right? I'm a math maniac, right? I just like to do things mathematical. The last 2 cars that I've bought, I did this idea where I was like, oh, Brian, I'm going to do the 23.8. I'm going to stretch it over 36 months. I'm not going to... I just hate car payments. Oh, I just hate car payments. So I've made the decision on both the last 2 cars, even though I had every intent to pay them off over 3 years, I just got annoyed with them and I paid them off both within the first year because I just don't like having the car payments. But this is what I did not do, and this is what you just said. I did not sacrifice maxing out my 401k. I did not sacrifice maxing out Roth IRAs, maxing out HSAs. I did all of the order of operation stuff and still hit my 25%. And then I said, okay, could I save more, which would probably be mathematically optimal, or just wipe out these cars? And I personally made the choice to wipe out the cars.
Well, that's what it comes back to. When you talk about the 23.8 rule, there are several additional components that kind of get glossed over. In addition to the luxury cars or 12 months, same as cash, it's also make sure your investments are greater than your monthly payment. Meaning I want you to be putting $1,000 or $800 a month towards your investment accounts, and your $300 a month car payment, I want it to be that way, not $300 a month towards your investments and then an $800 to $1,000 car payment. You've got that all wrong. So make sure you get the decision right on the front end so that your eyes aren't bigger than your wallet, because I think that's a big part of it as well. But I appreciate the financial mutant thought process with super low interest rates. Why would I ever pay this off? But there are some other factors that are in the background that go into this decision making.
Love it. All right, Brian, this next question is from Carlos. This is on YouTube. It says, hey, we're saving for a backyard to do within the next 14 months. I want to invest the money because of inflation. My spouse doesn't. Who wins the argument? Why are you guys using us as a mechanism to solve arguments between you and your spouse? That's not... this is like the money guy marriage counseling.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because I've gotten to an age. 14 months seems like you'll be here tomorrow.
I mean, you're going to blink and that's going to happen.
So this is a project. Sounds like you as a household have come up with. We definitely need to do this landscaping project. 14 months, you can probably tell where we're leaning. I think anything that you need the money, 24, 36 months, it doesn't really need to be invested. It's more of a high yield type savings account, where it's a cash equivalent, because there's just too much volatility. I've seen people say, I'm going to just put my emergency reserves in bonds. And you're like, well, what could go wrong with bonds? Realize bonds have interest rate risk.
That's right.
I mean, what happens if all of a sudden the Federal Reserve decided, instead of artificially keeping interest rates at zero or close to zero, what if they started going up? Anybody who owns existing bonds or holdings, there is, well, I'm not going to say it's there's going to be an impact on the value of that bond, because bonds derive their value from two components. It's the interest that they pay, but also just the underlying value, which could be discounted, or you could receive a premium depending upon what that stated interest rate is. So that should come into play. And it's just, even bonds that are perceived as super safe can have risk, a limited amount of risk that could bother you if you have this landscaping project. And imagine to your loved one that you had this brilliant idea that you're going to go buy bonds. And, even if that's what you're considering investing, and then you come back later and find out that it was worth 5 to 10% less.
You'd be sick.
You'd be pretty upset. So I know cash is unfortunately not paying hardly anything, because interest rates are artificially held low by our government and the Federal Reserve and the central bankers. But it is one of those things where the money will at least be there 14 months in the future when you need to fund that project. So don't let your fear of missing out on high returns cause you to lose out on being able to fund those key goals. And here's the kind of a closing point I always also like to say about cash. Cash is also a great opportunity funder, in the fact that a lot of people, I think a lot of my wealth creation, in addition to doing the automatic wealth creation of saving 25% of my gross income, some of my key opportunities have been when I've had cash to capitalize on when nobody else has cash.
Yep.
And so that's another reason why I think cash is such a valuable resource. I know we hear cash is trash, but cash is also a very valuable resource, not only for funding your objectives and goals like you have, but also for those who are reaching the abundant stage of you even are paying down your mortgages and other things faster. You still might want to have some extra cash for buying into opportunities when nobody else has the ability to fund it. If
you're worried about inflation, because that's what you said your concern was, I think a better strategy would be to oversave for the project. If you think the project might cost you X dollars, save X dollars plus 10%, and you're likely going to offset any inflationary increase in the cost of the project. I think it'd be better doing that than trying to invest those dollars. Guys, thank you so much for letting us answer your questions. We say this over and over. This is one of our favorite things to do, and our hope is that we are adding value to your financial lives so that you can take your finances to the next level. If you haven't had a chance to go check out the website, go to moneyguide.com, check out our resource page. If you're curious about what we do during our day job, go check out aboundwealth.com. Thank you for letting us be a part of your financial story.
Guys, I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy Team, out.